Two questions come up in almost every planning conversation I have. The first one sounds like a Social Security timing question, but it's really a question about whether you can trust yourself to make an irreversible decision. The second one sounds like a question about annuities, but it's really a question about whether you can trust me. Today, both of those questions get a real answer. If you've been circling either one for months without a clear answer, that's not because the questions are unanswerable. It's because the industry tends to give you a spreadsheet when you need a framework. Today, you get the framework. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're listening to The Income Standard, where retirement income is designed, not guessed. I am Todd Long, and this is the show for people who are done accumulating and ready to start engineering. Let's get into it. The first question today comes from a listener I'll call Rick. Rick writes, Todd, I'm 62 and I've been going back and forth on Social Security for 2 years. My wife says, wait. My brother says, take it right now because you never know. My advisor gave me a spreadsheet I don't fully understand. What's the right answer? Rick, I love this question, and I want to start by telling you something that might surprise you. The fact that you've been going back and forth for 2 years isn't indecision. It's your brain correctly identifying that this is one of the most consequential, irreversible financial decisions of your life. You're not, confused because you're not smart enough to figure it out. You're actually uncertain because the answer genuinely depends on factors nobody can actually know for certain, like how long you'll live, what happens to your health, whether the rules change, what your spouse's needs will be. So let me give you the framework I use, not a spreadsheet, a way of thinking. First, what Social Security actually is. Social Security is not a savings account. It's not an investment return. It's longevity insurance. It's the one income source in your retirement plan that is guaranteed by the federal government, inflation adjusted, and critically, it pays for as long as you live. When you understand it as longevity insurance, the filing decision becomes less about breakeven and more about risk management. Here's the core trade-off. If you file at 62 and you get more checks, but each check is about 30% smaller than your full retirement benefit permanently, that reduction follows you for the rest of your life. If you wait till 70, your benefit is up to 76% larger than your age 62 benefit. Every year you wait past 62 adds roughly 6 to 8% in guaranteed income, more than almost any safe investment available to retirees. The break-even question, when do I make back what I gave up by waiting, is actually the wrong frame, because the real question isn't total dollars, it's income durability. If you live to 85 or 90 years old, and statistically, for a 62-year-old couple, there's a 50% chance one of you does. The higher benefit is dramatically more valuable. Now, the spousal dimension. This is where Rick's situation gets really important and often gets missed. When the higher earning spouse dies first, the surviving spouse's benefit steps up to the higher earner's amount, if it's larger. That means your Social Security decision isn't just about your lifetime income, it's about what your wife receives after you're gone. Delaying the higher earner's benefit doesn't just increase your income. It increases your wife's survivor's benefit, potentially the difference between financial dignity and financial struggle in widowhood. So, Rick, here's my answer. If you're in reasonably good health, if your wife earns less than you, and if you can fund the gap between ages 62 and 67 or even 70 through other income sources, waiting is almost always the right structural decision. Now, if you have health concerns, a limited bridge income, or genuinely need the money now, that changes the calculus and warrants a detailed analysis. But your brother's logic, take it now because you never know, that's fear talking. And fear is not an income engineering strategy. Social Security is the only inflation-adjusted, government-guaranteed, longevity-insured income source most people will ever have. Treat it that way. Rick's question is one I hear consistently. It's pretty much all the time. And underneath it is almost always the same thing. Nobody has ever shown them what their Social Security decision means for their income floor. Not just the monthly checks, but the structure it creates or fails to create. If that's where you are right now, that's exactly what the Income Standard Review addresses. Now, before we get into the second question, I want to connect what we just covered to something larger. Now, Rick's Social Security decision isn't just a timing question. It's actually an income architecture question. The reason why I push back on early filing, especially for the higher earning spouse, is not because waiting always produces the best break-even math. It's because Social Security is the foundation layer of most people's income floor. And a smaller, earlier benefit means a floor that is structurally lower for the rest of your life. Here's what I mean. A 62-year-old couple where the higher earner files early might lock in a combined Social Security income of about $36,000 a year. Wait until the higher earner reaches 70, delay the lower earners to 67, and that same couple might have $52,000 to $56,000 a year in guaranteed income-adjusted income. That's a $16,000 to $20,000 difference in the annual floor every year for life. To generate that same $16,000 to $20,000 in guaranteed income through an annuity, you'd need to reposition $200,000 to $250,000 of portfolio assets. The Social Security optimization is worth roughly $200,000 in guaranteed income capital. And most people leave it on the table because they're afraid of the word wait. Now, I'm not saying wait is always right. Specific situations require specific analysis. But what I am saying is that the Social Security decision and the income floor are the same decision. They're not separate conversations. When you optimize Social Security, you're building your floor. When you under-optimize it, you're creating a gap that something else has to fill. So if you're in your early 60s and haven't seen your Social Security decision modeled as a floor-building exercise, not just a monthly check comparison, that's the conversation that's been missing. That's also exactly what the Income Standard Review maps. We are at the midway point, and I want to take a moment to step outside of the Q&A format for a second. Both questions so far, the Social Security timing and the annuity skepticism, point to the same underlying issue. Not which decision to make, but whether your income is built on guaranteed sources or assumptions. That's the question the Income Standard Review starts with. And it starts there because it's the foundation everything else is built on. The first component of every review is what I call the income layering analysis. It maps every income source, that's Social Security, pension, annuity income, portfolio withdrawals, part-time work, against your actual monthly expense profile. Guaranteed income on one side, non-negotiable expenses on the other. That map tells you something most retirement conversations never show you, whether your floor is structurally sound or structurally exposed. It's the first component because everything downstream, your sequence exposure, your longevity risk, your RMD trajectory, depends entirely on what this layer looks like. If you want to see what that analysis looks like before we get into the second half of this episode, go to the incomestandard.com, click on the review tab, and read through the 6 components, specifically component 1, income layering. If you find yourself reading that and thinking, nobody has ever mapped this out for me, that's exactly what this review is for. Theincomestandard.com, the review tab, 5 minutes of your time. Come back when you're ready. The second question comes from a listener I'll call Sandra. Sandra writes, Todd, I've been listening to your show and I find it really valuable, but I have a question. But I have to ask you directly. Aren't annuities just a way for people like you to make big commissions? Why would I ever trust a recommendation that benefits you financially? Sandra, thank you for that question. Genuinely, that question actually takes courage to ask. A lot of people don't, and it deserves a completely honest answer. And let me start with what's true in what you're asking. Yes, I am licensed to sell fixed index annuities and other insurance products. Yes, I receive compensation when a client purchases one. And yes, there is an entire category of bad actors in this industry who have recommended annuities in situations where they served the agent's commissions far more than the client's retirement. Those things are true. You are right to be skeptical. Industry skepticism, especially in financial services, is a healthy survival instinct. Now, let me tell you what's also true. The question of whether an annuity is right for you has absolutely nothing to do with whether it generates a commission. It has everything to do with whether it solves a specific problem in your income architecture. Here's how I think about it. An annuity is a tool, and like any tool, it's right for some jobs and wrong for others. A fixed index annuity is specifically designed to solve two problems: longevity risk and sequence of returns risks. It provides guaranteed income that cannot be outlived with principal protection from market losses. If those are problems in your retirement income architecture, if you don't have enough guaranteed income to cover your floor, if you're exposed to sequence risks in early retirement, then this tool may be the right one for the job. If your income floor is already fully covered by pension or Social Security, if you have no sequence of returns exposure, if your portfolio is large relative to your income needs, then it may not be. The tool should match the problem, full stop. If someone is recommending an annuity without first identifying the specific problem it solves, that's the red flag. Now, on the commission question specifically, here's something most people in my industry won't say. Insurance products pay commissions because the industry is just built that way. I don't apologize for that, but I don't hide from it either. What I will tell you is that my practice is built on repeat business, referrals, and long-term client relationships. A commission on a product that was wrong for the client destroys all three of those things. The income standard is a measurement framework. It's not a product pitch. When we do a review together, I'm not starting with, here's why you need an annuity. I'm starting with, here's what your income architecture looks like, here's where the gaps are, and here's what tools, if any, are the most efficient way to close them. Sometimes that tool is an annuity. Sometimes it's Social Security optimization. Sometimes it's a Roth conversion strategy. Sometimes it's repositioning assets you already have. Demand to understand what problem any product recommendation is solving. If that answer is clear and specific, the product is probably right. If the answer is vague and generic, walk away. That's the income standard on incentive alignment, and it applies to me as much as anyone else. So, Sandra, you're asking the exact right question. Keep asking it for every financial professional you work with. The ones who get defensive have something to hide. The ones who welcome it have nothing to fear. Two questions today. Rick's questions about Social Security timing. Sandra's questions about whether to trust the person recommending an annuity. On the surface, they're different questions. One technical, one relational. But underneath both of them is the same gap. Rick doesn't know whether waiting on Social Security is worth it because nobody has ever shown him what his income floor looks like with early filing versus optimized filing. He's comparing checks, not structures. Sandra doesn't know whether to trust an annuity recommendation because nobody has ever clearly mapped the specific income problem an annuity would solve in her situation. She's evaluating a product, not a solution. Both of them are working with incomplete information. Not because they're not smart enough to handle it, but because they've never been shown the income floor first. When you see the income floor, when the guaranteed income is mapped against the non-negotiable expenses and the specific dollar gap is visible, every other decision becomes cleaner. Social Security timing isn't abstract anymore. It's a specific contribution to closing or widening a specific gap. An annuity recommendation isn't a product pitch. It's a proposed mechanism for closing a gap that has already been measured and shown to you. That's the difference between a plan and a guess. And it's the difference between a conversation that ends in trust and one that ends in uncertainty. The floor is not the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of one that actually matters. If either of today's questions landed differently than you expected, if Rick's situation or Sandra's skepticism sounds like something that lives in your own planning, the floor map is the starting point. That's what the review builds first, before anything else. If you have more questions like Rick's or Sandra's, questions that the financial industry tends to dance around, send them in. The Income Standard is a show that gives direct answers to the questions you've been told are too complicated for a clean answer. And if today's conversation made you think about your own situation, if Rick's indecision or Sandra's skepticism sounds familiar, that's the signal. The Income Standard Review starts with the income floor map. We identify your guaranteed sources, measure the gap, and show you what's required to close it before we ever discuss a specific product or strategy. Schedule your review at theincomestandard.com. No sales pitch, no product push, just a clear measurement of where you stand and what it would take to build a floor that holds. That is the Income Standard for this week, folks. If this episode gave you a framework you didn't have before, share it with someone who actually needs it. Forward it to a friend who's 5 years from retirement and still thinking in terms of balance sheets instead of income architecture. And if you found yourself thinking about your own income floor while listening, like what's guaranteed, what's not, and what that gap might be, that's the signal. That's when this review makes sense. The review is waiting for you at theincomestandard.com. Again, that is theincomestandard.com. There's no cost, there's no pitch, just measurement. I'm Todd Long. We'll talk to you next week.